Hey,
Perfect.
Anita. Thank you for being on here. I appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. I've been following your work for at least a year or two, and I always love seeing your posts. You have great work, and your personality like really shines when I check out your YouTube videos or the videos you post. You always seem very personable and very interested in like kind of teaching people and showing people how you do what you do. So thank you.
Thank you. I try. I've been doing this for a while at this point. I think I've been doing YouTube for like 7 or 8 years. And it's really funny you say that I'm really personable because when I started, it was like my biggest fear being in front of the camera. And I remember seeing my very first video that I did for somebody else. It was basically like a guy that was doing the project for his college course, and he had to interview a photographer. I was based in Ireland back then, so he had to interview an Irish photographer, and I ended up doing it. And I was shaking. I was trembling. I was in front of the camera and I was like literally shaking like a leaf. I was terrified. I would not make eye contact into the camera. I was just the most awkward person ever. And to see where I started versus where I am now in front of the camera, it's day and night. It's insane. So thank you. Thank you for that. I really appreciate you
know
saying
what?
that.
I'm like chuckling here in my head because as you say that, I'm like, that's totally me. Like my first public speaking events, I did so horribly. And even I think I've
Mhm.
gotten a lot better. Like recently, I was at the Decentral event in Miami during Art Basel. I think you were there, right? How much? Yeah.
I was.
And it was a great event. And I was one of the speakers. And afterwards, one of my friends that I was out there with was like, "Oh, you sound so natural, and it sounds so great." And I was like, I was literally like, like shaking inside. I'm like, I look
Yeah.
like so horrible. It's
Yeah.
funny how your internal thing is so different from like your external thing, isn't it?
For sure. Yeah, no, I remember when I started, I was super self-conscious and I did not want to be in front of the camera. And that's kind of part of the reason why I didn't start YouTube until when I did. I was toying with the idea for maybe like a year or two. And when I started the very first few videos, I was basically putting up like Photoshop tutorials and little like music video style behind the scenes of my models,
Mhm.
something that did not include me in it. I didn't have to talk. It was definitely a big struggle, just like putting yourself out there. I am a very self-conscious person when it comes to that kind of stuff. And just like putting yourself out there, especially for people to criticize, because you do open yourself to critique when you put your work out there. And I feel like especially back in the day, people didn't really know the online ethics as much, and they just said whatever they pleased because they thought that they were anonymous. And you're not a real person, you're just a person on the screen, so you don't have real feelings. So I remember that was definitely a big thing for me at the very beginning when I started social media, and I think that's why it took me so long to get anywhere and to start anything, because it was so terrifying just like having that presence. And now you see people on TikTok and they just like dance in front of crowds, and I'm like, you go. I That's good for you. Looks great.
I'm just thinking it's so interesting because there's like this kind of like almost like a not bipolar, but kind of like a contradicting thing going on, like as far as like what you do for a living. Like here you are, someone that is admittedly you were at first a little bit what you're describing yourself, it sounds like a little bit socially uncomfortable, and then you kind of you did it anyway, and then it's like you're dealing with models who inevitably every model for the most part is going to go through a period of time where it's very very uncomfortable, and internally they're probably a lot of them probably have insecurities. And I've done a lot of photography myself and worked with models. So I know from speaking with them, there's a lot of insecurities underneath it. And it's like facing the fear anyway. And then, so a lot of like both what you do as your craft, as well as what you're doing with social media, as well as the models you're working with, all involves like facing your fears and doing it anyway. And I'm wondering how you sort of look at that and how you've sort of evolved from your experiencing dealing with those contradictions.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I feel like, I come from a point where I started photography professionally pretty young. It was my only job that I've ever had other than waitressing at the casino for a night, and I got fired after that. So that didn't go very well. Um, but I kind of stuck to it pretty early. I can be I have a strong personality, and I either stick to something straight away or I dump it after a month. And I've had a lot of hobbies throughout my childhood where I would, try something for a month or two and it wouldn't really stick. And I would just like abandon it somewhere along the way. And with photography, I just kind of knew from the beginning that this is what I wanted to do. I started taking photos and like I really loved it. And I guess once I started taking photos, I was living in Ireland, and Ireland is a very small community and there isn't that many jobs. And I was kind of getting to a point where I was getting really frustrated, and I felt like I was kind of at a dead end. And I was like 22, 23, and I was just not getting where I wanted to be. I didn't get the money that I wanted. I didn't get the clients that I wanted. I was just kind of doing it, living paycheck to paycheck, like borrowing money from my parents to like pay for rent and so on. So it was a very frustrating experience, but because of that being uncomfortable, it pushed me to explore YouTube. I've seen my friend Irene, who is my good friend now, but at the beginning, when I started, her channel was maybe like, I don't know, 50, 70,000 followers. And we're talking about like 7, 8 years ago. That was a lot. You
Yeah.
know, now anybody can click their fingers and get like 100,000. But back in the day, having 70,000 followers, especially on YouTube, was a huge thing. And I saw her work and I really loved it. And I was like, wow, like I would love to try it, but I just don't have the personality. I'm so shy. I'm so scared. But at the same time, I was kind of at the place where I was really unhappy where I was in my career. And I knew it was not going to change unless I did something. And I am a go-getter when it comes to that kind of stuff. If I am uncomfortable and I feel like I need to change something, I will. And that's what I did. I started posting YouTube videos just purely to have something to do. I didn't expect it to make money. I didn't expect to get anywhere with it. I just wanted a hobby and something that I do that isn't work and doesn't feel miserable when I do it. And I started getting traction. And when I started getting traction, obviously that made me kind of push myself out even more. So here, you know, to kind of to go back to your question, to answer your question, I feel like I do a lot of things from a space where I start becoming uncomfortable and I feel the need to change, and that kind of pushes me. I am not a very stagnant person. I don't like to be in one spot for a very long time. And if I feel like I'm stagnant at my work or in life, I kind of like to move it along a little bit. So as much as it made me uncomfortable, I love doing things that make me uncomfortable because they push me out of my comfort zone. I did jump off on an airplane twice. I am scared of heights, but I thought it was going to be good for me. So it's the same kind of thing, you know, even though it does scare me and a lot of these things I do not necessarily want to do, I know unless I do them, I'm not going to get anywhere. It's been the same with travel, with changing countries. You know, I've lived in multiple countries all over the world. And yeah, of course, it's hard because you start over in every single industry. You don't know anybody, you don't know any models. You start from ground zero where, you know, you have to prove yourself every single time. So every single time I would move countries, I would have to prove myself. And it sucks. It's very frustrating, especially when you've been doing it for a while, because you come to a point where you're like, okay, well, I've been doing this for 6, 7, 10 years. I keep having to prove myself and it sucks. But at the same time, eventually down the line, this is where you can kind of see the results, and where, you know, I have friends all over the world now and I can travel anywhere and I know people, I know models, I know photographers. And this is the kind of like a long-term effect. You can't look at something benefiting you straight away. It's a slow process that you build up to.
I love that answer. There's so many things I want to dive into. The first one, though, one of the things that I love about photography for myself is it kind of forces you to get into the habit of looking for beauty everywhere. I think that a lot of photographers that I know sort of have that aspect to them, where it's like, if you're not a photographer, of course you can see beauty everywhere, but when you are a photographer, you're kind of looking specifically for that. And that's like a really beautiful habit to get into, whether you share your photography or not. And you said like you're doing a lot of traveling. I looked on your website and I see all the, you know, all the exotic places in your work. I guess I would like to know, just out of my own curiosity, I think people will be interested in hearing like, what are like the real big differences of each place? Not the obvious ones, like there's a volcano here and there's palm trees there, but like I guess society driven, or the people, are people all the same everywhere? Like give me some of your insights as far as where you travel to and what's sort of like the biggest factors on what makes it really more enjoyable or less enjoyable for you. And before you answer that, I'm going to adjust my microphone a smidge, so give me 1 second.
That's fine. Take your time.
Okay, cool. I'm like watching the levels. I'm like, that should be up a little higher. But yeah, I would love to kind of hear that. I'd love to hear your insights on travel. I love traveling as well. And in that answer that you're about to give me, I'd love to kind of hear some of your background, because I don't know where you're from, and I'd love to hear a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I always knew that I wanted to travel. I didn't travel much when I was a kid because I was born in Poland. My parents were not well off at all. We ended up moving to Ireland when I was 14. And I always knew that I didn't want to live in Ireland, as bad as it sounds. I think it's a beautiful country, and it's a beautiful country to visit and to live. However, doing what we do, it's a very, very limited market for photography. And not to mention, I kind of always knew I wanted to be a swimwear photographer. And let's be honest, there's not much swimwear photography in Ireland. I don't know of a single swimwear brand that like does anything there. So
Yeah.
basically, I kind of was in a space where I was uncomfortable, and I knew that I wanted to do something, and I knew that the country that I was in wouldn't allow me to do it. And I traveled pretty young. I remember I was 16 when I went to Poland by myself, and I stayed in Poland by myself for a month, just like, doing my thing. And as I kind of grew older, I started going to different places in Europe because it's pretty cheap and you can do it on a budget. So
Mhm.
some of my first trips that I've done, I literally did it on like $200 budget for like a few days. I would go there, I would connect with model agencies, try and get a shoot or two just to build my portfolio. Because when you think about it, it's really hard to present yourself to clients a certain way. For example, if you want to be a travel photographer, right, and not have a travel portfolio, there's just no way to do it. Like you have to have something to show them for them to trust you. It's very unlikely that a client is going to hire you on your first job abroad and just, hope for the best. So I remember I went to a bunch of places in Europe, and that was cool. A lot of the time it was very difficult just because I was just starting and my portfolio was very small. I didn't have much of a social presence. So it was definitely way more difficult than it is now. I ended up going to South Africa in 2018, and that was like the first big international trip that I did kind of outside of Europe. I was there for 3 months. I ended up going to Cape Town for about a month, and this is where I kind of discovered my love of swimmer photography. I was kind of like cemented in it. I knew I wanted to do it. I did some insane shoots in there. I just connected with a few model agencies because at that point I had like a decent portfolio to like get them to give me models to work with. And then after that, a few months later, I saved up some money for a few months, and I ended up going to Bali, and I ended up staying in Bali for over 2 years, I think, on and off. I
Mhm.
ended up flying to Europe for a few months. I ended up going to Australia and a few other places, but I was based in Bali for that time, and that was obviously amazing for my portfolio because I was able to do shoots on the regular. It's much easier to build up your portfolio if you're living in a place instead of driving or flying up to where you need to be to take the photos, because you can just organically come up with ideas and make them happen as you go instead of having
Sorry,
to
you hear
bunch
that?
up like 20
Sorry,
shoots.
sorry, there's beeping in the background. My wife is cooking upstairs, and I think our smoke alarm just went
I
off.
can't hear anything. It's okay.
That's amazing. You can't hear that. It's so loud. Okay.
No, not at all. I have cats and they meow as well outside the door. So if you hear that,
Okay. Got it.
they're trying to break in. They're like, "Mom, where are you?" But yeah, so I did that, and that was amazing. Bali has a lot of really beautiful models and really beautiful locations. And at that point, when I was there, I was able to do a lot of things just in exchange for photos, which was amazing for me. Because obviously, it's really hard to get the budget to cover all the locations and all these things when you're just starting out. Like you usually don't have the money. So being able to do that and being able to shoot in these really beautiful locations definitely gave my portfolio a boost, which was great. Um, and yeah, I mean, I lived in Hawaii for a year. Now I'm in Connecticut. I am soon to move to LA. So when it comes to people and cultures, it's very interesting because the more you travel, the more similarities you see in the places that you've been. You go to a certain place and you're like, oh, this looks like the place I've been last year, or this house looks very similar to this country. And there is a lot of similarities in between these countries. When it comes to cultures, I think the biggest culture shock I've had was in America.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting because I didn't expect that. But to be honest, I feel like, I don't know, I traveled all over Asia, and somehow I think the culture here and the hustle culture here, and I think Americans have a lot of ego that they're just like brought up with. And it's very interesting to see because especially, coming from Poland and coming from Ireland, especially Ireland is people in Ireland are very self-deprecating. They hate compliments. They don't know how to handle it. Compliments make you almost uncomfortable. And it's like that in a lot of places, especially in Europe. But if you come to America, it's kind of almost expected. Like if you don't compliment somebody, like people take compliments really well, which is very interesting. So this is kind of the differences I've seen. To be honest, as I said, most of the time, it's fine. I think you just have to be a bit of a people person, and you just have to be able to read people and just get along with them.
Yeah.
Being friendly, being polite, being very open and funny on shoots always helps. I've never had issues with models because I can make myself, I am a bit of a clown on set sometimes, I will admit. And I will laugh and I'll crack jokes, and I do have a potty mouth, so I do curse, and I'm a bit inappropriate in that sense. So I think it kind of breaks the barrier because I act very natural with the models, and obviously the fact that I'm a woman as well makes it easier. But yeah, I never really struggled as much, I guess, maybe because I've been doing it for a while and because I've seen a lot of different personalities and a lot of different cultures, and I feel like I'm a chameleon and I can kind of like blend in with that. But I think that's the best way to describe it.
Well, first I'll say that I'm actually half Polish myself. Both my mom's parents came from Poland, from Warsaw and Wood.
Okay,
So
nice.
little Polish fist bump right there. I'm with you on that one. But I'm really curious, oh, man, I would like to know sort of, where am I going with this? So you said you were drawn early to like swimsuit and fashion, and I'm kind of curious, like
Mhm.
where that came from. Like it's an interesting genre to get into, and it's very competitive now. Like from where you started 7, 8 years ago, like you said, such a different world. Like everyone's either a model or a photographer now, and it's changed
For
so
sure.
much. And then also, so on that, we talked briefly before we started, and you had said also like it's very important for you to kind of um, capture and sort of document nude photography and nudism as being natural. So if you want to touch upon that and maybe what it is about the swimsuit genre in general that sort of kind of captures you, what is it about that inspires you?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know if I have a great answer to that because I don't really know. I feel like sometimes it's just a matter of preference.
Mhm.
uh I just somehow was always drawn to that, and I think just the fact that it's like, I love taking pictures in nature in general. I don't really like taking photos in the studio. Sorry, 1 second.
That's okay.
What's happening? What did you do? Did you break something? Did you break something? Look, we have a criminal.
Oh, how cute.
Criminal has broken into the bathroom.
Very
Okay,
cute.
we can start. I'll just try and lock the bathroom so I can.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, you silly goose.
For everyone listening, she showed us her very cute cat.
The other day he got tangled. I had like a paper bag with a vinegar that I bought. It was like a balsamic vinegar.
Mhm.
He got tangled in it. He got scared, smashed it on the ground. The entire kitchen was covered in vinegar. He was covered in vinegar. He had the bag stuck on his head. He was like running frantically all over the house, knocking everything down. And then I had to give him a bath. He was insane. This happens on a daily. I'm sorry. But yeah, going back to your question, I think I've always been fascinated by the female body. I think the female body is like just really beautiful in terms of just the natural shapes and the curves. And I think my main fascination is with showing the female body versus the natural environment.
Mhm.
So a lot of the time when I shoot, I will take photos, by the mountains or by the water, and I will present the model in a way that kind of blends with her surroundings almost.
Mhm.
And I do that especially when it comes to nude photography. I started doing nudity maybe like 2 years ago, and I love it. My only problem with nudity and taking photos of it is the fact that it's so heavily stigmatized, especially nowadays. And it's kind of getting worse and worse, where I'm kind of at the point where I can't post any of it. And even if it's implied, even if it doesn't really show anything, I'm kind of going against Instagram, shadow banning me. I've been shadow banned multiple times. Twitter used to be good, not anymore. Same thing. You get shadow banned, you get, warnings on your tweets, and it kind of comes to a point where you're like, okay, I'm shooting these beautiful images, but nobody will be ever able to see them. So what's the point?
Mhm.
And it's extremely frustrating because I do want to shoot them. It's my favorite thing to shoot. But at the same time, you're kind of at the point where you're like, okay, well, what's the next step? And this is the kind of part that frustrates me the most. I think a lot of it comes from the religious standpoint of people just being super strict with nudity and bodies and everything natural because they consider it sinful and bad and lustful. And when you think about it, we are born naked. So why make it sexual? Why make it wrong? I was at a beach in Hawaii, and it was a nudist beach, and it was my first ever nudist beach I've ever been to. And there was this family next to me, and they were sitting there with their little baby. And just the idea of raising a child in a situation where they can just be fully themselves and they don't have to feel ashamed for their body. I think that's something that would help people just in general with everything, with like social relationships, with um just feeling more comfortable. And I think even in terms of all the abuse that's happening and everything that's going on in the world, I feel like if we normalize nudity more, I'm not saying there'll be less of that because I don't know, I'm not, I don't have the data, but I feel like if we made people more comfortable with nudity and with bodies and nakedness, I feel there would be less of that sexual aggression.
Mm.
um and that's something that I struggle with the most, just the fact that it's so heavily stigmatized and it's so heavily kind of frowned upon. And I started working with a lot of creators on OnlyFans as well recently. That's like a big turn that I took in my career really recently that I really love.
Hmm.
And I've been shooting for an agency that does basically they what's the word? They represent girls that do OnlyFans. So they hire me and I take their photos, I take their sets basically. And seeing how hard these girls work, and I know it seems like, oh, you're just like new. This is hard work. Have you ever tried to be naked in front of the camera and looking good for 40 minutes straight, or like 2 or 3 hours straight? Like, it's hard. You have to come up with so many creative ideas. You have to come up with so many creative poses, because obviously these people want to see different things. They don't want to see the same cookie cutter set every single week. And these girls push sometimes 23, 25 sets a month. That's a set a day. It's insanity. It's so much work. And I think people just like, frown upon it and they look down on it, thinking it's something filthy. But at the same time, these are the same people that pay for it. So I don't know. I think there's space for it. And I think there's a lot of, I think people get really enraged because women make money of something that has been monetized by men, or like, has been offered to men for free for such a long time. And now for the first time that they monetize off it, there's this like uproar and like outrage of like, how dare you? So I think that's interesting. Sorry, a bit off topic.
That's okay. It's a very interesting topic, and I think it's I don't know, this is how I feel. I think it's okay to have contradicting opinions on certain parts of it. I think that especially if you're on social media, it's either all this or it's all that. And somewhere in the middle, maybe there's some common ground. Like there's an argument to be made on both sides that has some weight to it, right? Like there's one side that I see and I understand where it's like nudity is natural, you're born that way, it shouldn't be like on one hand, you could have an argument that it's crazy that we can turn on the TV and see people's brains exploding on a violent movie, but you can't see boobs.
Yeah.
On the other hand, like I have three young children and I don't really want them exposed to overly overt sexual things when they're really little. Like my kids are seven and 9. So like, and on the other hand, I could see all angles. Like I've been to nude beaches, and after like 5 minutes, it becomes very normalized, and there's nothing necessarily like weird about it. And I think it could be very good for people to feel comfortable in your own skin, but maybe there's a time and a place for it. And like the other argument is like some people will say, oh, there's nothing sexual about it, but it's like you're talking about OnlyFans, and that's really it's all sexual. So it's like you can't say on one side that it's like it's not sexual and it's not about that, whereas everyone on OnlyFans is making money because it is sexual. So it's like I think that it's maybe not all really bad and it's not all
Of
naturally
course.
good. And
Yeah. No,
that's
as you said, there's definitely time and place for everything. I kind of think that there should be some sort of a way for creators to like either, kind of have like some platforms have like plus 18 or whatever, right? I'm kind of talking at it from a perspective of like Instagram, right? Where technically a lot of young kids shouldn't be on it in the first place anyway. I don't think Instagram is a place for kids like under 15, because just like, seeing all the face tunes, seeing all the random things that pop up on Instagram is just not really a place for kids, if you ask me. Regardless, I feel like there should be some sort of a way where you can, for example, put a warning and somebody maybe has to agree to it before they see your images, right? So they can be blurred and then you put a warning, or there can be like some sort of like parental controls or something. So I definitely understand and I agree with your point. And, there's a difference in terms of nudity, like as you said, like at a nude beach where everybody's just like minding their own business, just like tanning naked versus, I don't know, people doing things on OnlyFans, right? I look at it from a perspective of someone who, like, I see the content that the girls shoot, and a lot of the time it's like way less like sinister that you would think it is. It's not really at all. I think it's just like a lot of the time it's just like beautiful images of them in the lingerie, or like implied, like it's not always nudity as well, which is pretty interesting because you would think that they go like full way, and that's not actually a thing at all. So definitely, I definitely think there's time and place, like with everything, but I think there should be some sort of a way for people to be able to express themselves, to verify themselves. And unfortunately there isn't. It's just, a lot of the time I post images that aren't even nude. For example, you'll have an image where the girl is, for example, I don't know, not wearing a bra, but she's covered, or she's like, holding her boobs too much, taken down. And it's just like, it's this constant like hunt for anything that might be even slightly sexual. Like I had images taken down where a girl is wearing like lingerie, like full lingerie. She's not showing anything. Like it's all covered, no nipples, no nothing. And they still flag it. And there's no way to appeal it. There's no way to go back on it. So I think that's the frustrating part. And as you said, I definitely see all the sides. I definitely think that, sometimes you see stuff and it's just way too much. You see things that come up on Instagram even, and it's just like full on porn, and like you don't really want to see that either. Like I have that issue with Twitter because of the content that I post on there. A lot of the people that follow me on there have some weird accounts, and because Twitter was way more like lenient towards it, you would let you open it and it's a cucumber or an aubergine or whatever. And I'm like, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see this. Absolutely. But again, I think that there's just ways to go about it. And I think it's just like right now, you're just, made to believe that everything that is even slightly nude or has any, female body in it is just evil, and you just should shun it and just like kill it with fire, So that's the issue I have.
It's such a fascinating topic. It really is, because like as you said, you've traveled the world, and like each country, each society has such drastically like different feelings on it. And it's like once you're in any of those, that sort of becomes normalized. Like if you go to like a more Muslim based country, like just showing your hair might be like scandalous, or showing your kneecaps, like, oh my God, that's porn. And then, like I live in New Jersey, and I live on the beach, like I'm a mile from the beach. And like in the summer, the swimsuits have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But yet you go to Europe, certain places in Europe or even in the United States, and like topless is totally fine. And it's like, it's very interesting. It's like whatever becomes society's norms sort of just becomes normal. And it's hard for me because it's like, I'm number one, I'm a straight dude. So I have one feeling my hormones say one thing of me, but I'm also an artist and I've studied anatomy. So I see like the purely artistic side. And then I'm also a parent. So I also have a daughter, so it's like all these contradicting feelings and thoughts. And I think it's interesting to kind of work it out. Like whenever I take my kids to the museum and they see nude painting from like the 1500s, it's like I explain to them it's art and it's not weird. Like they're like, why does the guy naked with a sword and a shield? I'm like, I don't know. It's just what they did. It's like, it's very interesting.
But that's the thing. It used to be normal back in the day, like in terms of like arts and stuff. When you look at like Renaissance, it's like everybody's naked in this. There's barely any clothing. And I think again, if society, kind of treats it as normal, then that's what it is. It's the same with like, this is the big thing that I see is like, for example, breastfeeding, right? How some people get offended by breastfeeding, but I'm like, you are literally feeding your baby. This should not be an issue. Somebody offending you breastfeeding is a you issue, not being okay with boobs versus and sexualizing them and being like, oh my God, they should be like covered.
That's
But it's
literally
like, it's
why
a
they're there.
natural thing.
Yeah, that's
And that's the thing. And I think that's the thing. Obviously, there's different spectrums of sexuality and different spectrums of like, what should and should not be online, or like, what should be presented to kids, or what should be presented to people in general. But I think just in general, the consensus is I would like whether the body is covered or not, I would like for it to be considered natural to have the body. And I think, it goes past just nudity. I think it's just like, the whole movement with how difficult it is to post yourself online if you're not like a certain weight and a certain look, and if you don't have, an hourglass shape, and if your boobs aren't a certain size. And there's a lot of these preconceived ideas of what a female body should be like, and when it doesn't fit the mold, your mind is blown. And it's the same, like, again, the same argument between, male nipples and female nipples. It's like, why is a male nipple okay but a female nipple is not okay? And then they had that situation where if you're transgender you can show your boobs, but if you're a biological female you can't. And it's just like, it's just drawing these lines where it's just like, what's okay and what's not okay. How can you prove that somebody is a certain way? And it's just like, I think there should be a way where either everybody can show them or nobody can show them. It's one or the other. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think it's a very, very deep topic and you could go about it forever. And I don't think you would get anywhere. I think the problem is, bottom line, there's still a lot of shame and a lot of anger people have towards nudity. And I think, I come from a perspective where I was raised, I didn't have, like, my parents are not artists at all. Like, I've never had like art books or magazines. Like, the only magazines I've seen were the really corny magazines that they keep on the very top shelf in the store, the ones that you're not supposed to reach. And these were the kind of photos that I've seen. So my personal goal in life is to kind of make nudity something that is classy and tasteful and beautiful, instead of just something that is made to be sexualized and for the male gaze. Because you can do both. I'm not saying that my photos aren't sexual, because they definitely are. But you can still present it in a way that's very tasteful, and that's not something that is, it's not all about like, oh, it's the boob or it's the ass. There's more to it than that, and that's kind of my goal with my career, at least.
I think with men, I think men actually, it's not talked about enough, but I think men suffer from the same sort of stereotypes. Like, if you're not over 6 foot and you don't have a chiseled jaw and you don't have features like broad shoulders, like, so it's like, it's very commonly spoken about with women, and understandably so, but men suffer from the same sort of things and they don't talk about it enough. And it's yeah, you're right. It's like, none of us should be objectifying, like, you're more than a set of body parts, so am I, and everyone else is as well. But on the other hand, you're only young and beautiful for a certain period of time with those youthful appearances, and why not celebrate it?
Of course. Yeah.
Speaking on that, I want to ask you about this as well. So as an artist, or as any creative, musician and a photographer, an artist, whatever, there's inevitably going to be a part of your career that is involved around, number one, imposter syndrome, where you don't think you deserve it, but then also comparing, like, to everyone else. Like, if I scroll, I'm inevitably going to be seeing things that I'm interested in. I'll see other artists and I'm like, inevitably scrolling like, oh my God, why are they so good? Or scrolling, why are they getting attention and I'm not? You scroll some more, like, oh, what are they doing? Or why are they doing that better than me? And there's so much comparison, and it's so toxic, and we all do it, and it's so difficult. But then on top of that, so as a photographer, I would imagine, I would love to hear you talk about this. You must experience that comparison of like, this person's doing that, blah, blah, blah. But then also, I'm curious how it affects you as a woman, because as a woman, you're also standing in front of beautiful women. So there's like I would imagine, a personal comparison as well. Like, comparing yourself physically, not only your work, but then yourself. So how do you kind of cope with and manage and balance like the insecurities, the comparison, and the vulnerabilities that comes with your job?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because first thing first, there's definitely a lot of the comparison going on. And I think personally, a lot of it comes down to where you are in life and how happy you are where you are. Because I remember when I was starting out and I was trying to, get followers and get better models. And a lot of the time I would feel like I was hitting roadblocks. And at that times, that's when I kind of felt the most toxic towards myself, in the way that I was talking to myself. I was thinking to myself that I'm an imposter, that I can't do it. And I think what's important to me and what helped me a lot is I know that there is like I am aware enough of myself that I know that there are certain trigger people whose work I see and that triggers me. And the best you can do is remove yourself from that situation. There's always like one or two people that you look at and you get really frustrated. You're like, I wish I had your life. I wish I traveled where you are. I wish I should have shot your models, you know. And the best thing is to remove yourself. I'm not saying you have to block them, but just don't follow them. Don't look at their work. Like just find your own peace, because it's really hard to step away from that if you keep seeing some. It's kind of like, you know, trying to break up with somebody and then seeing their photos on your timeline all the time. You know, if you want to get rid of your ex from your life, just don't look at them. And that's the best way as well for comparing yourself. You just have to remove yourself from the situation. Like there was a few photographers I remember back in the day where like I was in the same industry as well. We were like in the same country, and there was one or two that I didn't like personally, but I also did like, you know, I looked at them and I was like, okay, I don't like you and you have cool work and it annoys me. And I just removed myself from that. I just stopped following them. I would just like unfollow them or block them. And I'm better off. I forgot that they exist and I just moved on with my life. And I think that's the best thing to do. And I think the biggest thing for me is to always compete with myself first, because it's really important to get better images and get better work for yourself. So as long as I'm growing where I am, you know, I expand my portfolio, I get better with my work. That's the biggest stressor for me. And there has been a time, you know, recently where I was kind of in a rut and I wasn't really doing great creatively. I just like, didn't really know what to do. And, you know, when you do something for so long, I've been doing photography for like close to 15 years now. So it's been a while. Once you do something for so long, it's really hard to get yourself excited again, because you end up taking photos and they're beautiful photos, but they are just of different people in different places. But the idea is the same. Your brain works the same. So for me, the biggest struggle, instead of comparing myself to somebody else, is trying to fight against my own brain to just try and do something different, try and do something outside of the box, trying to find things that I haven't done yet. And the biggest thing for me was nudity when I started taking nude photos, because it was something different. It was something exciting. I got to shoot it in a different light. I started, you know, capturing the female form different than I would just like swimwear, and just the way I was posing and framing and all these kind of things, and like, you know, incorporating my nudes into nature as well. So that was a big one for me. I don't remember the second part of your question was.
Oh, that's okay. I was just saying, like, you know, just the comparison, and you know, I was just basically saying that as a photographer, you're constantly comparing to other work, but then also as a
Oh
woman.
yeah, me comparing myself to the models. I remember now. Yeah. So about that, I don't know. I feel like I've always had a healthy self-conscious. Like I know my place. Like I know that these girls are like, I think I look at it from perspective. Everybody has something. And you know, you always look at people that are the most beautiful and you're like, oh my God, they must just be, you know, looking in the mirror and just like singing their own praises. And sometimes the people that are the most beautiful are also the most self-conscious. That's what I've learned, that there is not a single person that looks at their body and they're like, fuck yeah, I'm hot. You know, they're usually like, there's usually something that they don't like about themselves. And especially when you work on social media, especially when you're on photos so much, it brings out a lot of these things that you don't like about yourself. I recently started taking photos of myself, which I haven't really done much before. But I'm kind of exploring that venue now, which is a lot of fun. But it's also really daunting because the camera, out of all the things, the camera really shows any imperfections that you have. Is it like your face, your body, any like rolls, any like cellulite, anything? It comes out. And when you stare at your own photos for an extended period of time, it breaks your head because you're like, oh my God, this is insane. Like this is so bad, you know? But again, it's about angles. It's about knowing your light. And this is just like, you know, part of the growth. You kind of have to understand that this is just a perception of you, and how you view yourself is the most important. But it's definitely like an, you know, up and down battle. Sometimes it's great, sometimes not so much, depending how you feel, depending how you take care of your body, and like, you know, all these things. So it's definitely haven't been easy, but I wouldn't say that I would like ever compare myself to models. I think the biggest stressor is just looking at your own photos and being like, oh shit, like I need to change this and that, and like I would like to look like this, and I would like to do that, and then that's the stressor here.
It's a fascinating process because, you know, when you're doing photography, then that's part of it, and then the other part of it comes with like the editing. And I remember a lot, like a while ago when I was doing a lot of shooting with models, that you'd spend so much time like correcting everything that on the negative side, it also puts your brain in a mindset of like looking for that in the mirror, or like seeing
Mhm.
that everything. Like I got very I noticed my like OCD perfectionism thing sort of got too strong, and I just started noticing, oh, this is not perfect in my life, or that's not, how can I fix this, how can I fix that?
Mhm.
It's a fine line between that. I'm like wondering, have you, or do you ever want to have interest in shooting that doesn't involve like elongating your neck and putting your shoulders down? Like, do you like ever shooting people that maybe aren't like classically beautiful, or like going photographing homeless people or whatever? Like, is there a part of you that someday you want to explore that as maybe part of your portfolio?
Yeah, so like I'll start with saying that, one thing that I've noticed about taking photos of myself, and that's something that I've always kind of lived by and I'm not planning on changing, is whenever I take photos of myself, I always try and keep the editing to like absolute minimum. So like I'll working on like some imperfections, like some spots or whatever it is that is not temporary. But I always kind of go out of my way, or trying not to go out of my way, to like change my body and my general appearance in a lot of ways, because and I do the same to models. Like I never Photoshop the model's shape or their size or anything like this, because I feel like it's important for me. Again, it kind of goes back to your body image. I feel like if I started photoshopping myself a lot, and if I started making myself look like it's not me, I would go back into the mirror and be like, shit, I look awful. This is really bad. Why do I look like this? I look at my photos and I look beautiful, and then I look in the mirror and I look awful. So it's very important for me to preserve myself how I am in these photos, so I can maintain body image. Like, yeah, of course, somebody, you might want to like smooth your skin a little bit or something, it's normal, it's fine. But as long as you and still look like yourself, and you don't look like a character that you created in AI, like that's fine. Um, but yeah, I think it's definitely interesting. I definitely want to, I don't know. I don't think I would want to do street photography and so on. I don't think that's kind of my niche. If anything, I would love to do maybe more landscapes, where it doesn't include like humans at all. Um, but I think for me, it will be more going in the direction of just like shooting bodies how they are, kind of like, going further to, I've been fortunate enough to be able to shoot with a lot of plus size models and a lot of models of different skin tones, which I love. I love including as many skin colors in my work as possible, because I think it's important for me as a photographer to understand the color and how the light, hits the body and the skin tones and so on. So I think for me, it's more that just going in that direction of just like creating a beautiful body of work where I have all different shapes and sizes and ages as well, because getting different ages is the difficult one, because you don't have a lot of older models doing especially nudity, and that's something that I would definitely love to explore as well. Just bodies as they are, not posed, not photoshopped. And it's a difficult one, I'm not gonna lie, because there's a lot of pushback against it. If you post photos of plus size girls, it always gets, negative comments, and it always gets really negative things said about them. And I feel bad, because like I don't want to ever have my models see any of this, because that's somebody's perception and I don't want them to feel like that. So here you're kind of in a situation where like you also have to look out for these comments and like get rid of them and like put like keywords that like block them. So there's definitely a lot to be changed in society, and it's kind of hard to do these things when you create this work and it doesn't necessarily get perceived how you want it to be perceived. Because let's be honest, we're not all doing it for likes and followers, but it is an important part of your work. You want to be somehow recognized for what you do, and you also want to make money of what you do, because you can't live off air. You have to make money somehow. So um, I'm happy to see that it's going in that direction now. I'm happy to see that there's more brands, especially that are adopting that form of just shooting with different body sizes, shooting with different skin tones, because it's been very limited over the years, especially in swimwear. And I still see brands that do these very traditional, very male gazy kind of campaigns with girls who are just tiny. They're so small, and that's totally fine. But there definitely has to be more inclusivity. And kind of to what you touched on before, this is a very interesting conversation that I had with somebody the other day, is I was on a Gymshark website. And this is literally what I was saying, that, they have a very large plus size section when it comes to women. But when you look at the male side of the website, all these guys are like 6'4" and ripped. And they are really ripped. They're not like, oh, I just have some muscle. No, they're ripped. And the only photo that I found of a guy that looked normal was a guy doing yoga, which I think is such a weird stereotype. And I think it's very weird for a company claiming to be exclusive, but then only presenting the side that's more popular, because let's be honest, plus size women are promoted nowadays and plus size guys not as much yet. And it's very interesting to see like brands integrity and how they do certain things, not necessarily because they want to do what's right, but it's for clout. So touching on your point of men being self-conscious.
I don't think brand integrity or doing the right thing has anything to do with it. I think it's just about making more money, looking really good to society, like using the right hashtags at the right time. Like it's very strange, right? Because on the one hand, like I just went shopping with my family the other day. We're walking around, and it's like it's very interesting because on the one hand, obviously we should all be comfortable with who we are, and everyone deserves to have like clothing that fits them well and is flattering. But it's also interesting because it's almost like we're celebrating an how do I say this politely? We're celebrating a lifestyle that maybe isn't the most healthy also, which is kind of interesting, and I don't know if it's the best thing for us either, right? Like but to
I don't know. I think it's a tricky subject, because I think not like being plus size doesn't necessarily mean that you're not healthy. There's people that have diseases, or like, there's people that have like certain conditions that like make them be this way. And, I feel like as long, like the way I think about life and everything in it, whether, I don't know, like if something doesn't affect me personally, right? If, for example, like gay marriage, right? If two men getting married doesn't affect me, why should I be against it? If it has nothing to do with me. A girl being plus size has nothing to do with me. I take care of my body the way I want to take care of my body, and they do too. And I think it's good for them to have representation and have somebody that looks like them, so they can see what the clothes are going to look like on them. And I think every single brand should strive for having all the sizes represented. Like, for example, if you go on Skims website, right, you have a girl that is size 16, girl that is size 12, and they all show them in the same outfit. And I think that's super helpful, because going to a position where every single online store now is mostly an online store, there's no physical stores almost anymore, like all the malls are dead. It's good for you to be able to see what the clothes are going to look like on you. And whether it fits your lifestyle or not, as long as it doesn't affect you necessarily, like I don't see a problem in it. And I don't think that should be, I think that's a good thing to go towards, to have that representation. And I don't know, I just think it should go both ways, as you said, kind of like going, with women and with men as well. I see certain brands doing it. I saw, like, I think ASOS does like plus size for guys, which is super cool as well. But I think we still have a long ways to go. But in general, like, as I said, as long as it doesn't affect me personally and it helps somebody else, I don't really mind. Like, it's good for you. It's good for you to be able to see your clothes. It's good for you to see like how they're going to look on your body and so on. So that's my personal opinion.
I totally understand. I do think it's important to I don't know. I think it's important to strive for healthiness, whatever that means for everyone. But on your note, though, it is so true. Like for women, like it is represented. We'll use that word very widely, right? Like no matter what size you're set. Like for me, I'm like a smaller guy. I'm like more athletically built. I'm not like huge or whatever. And it is very, very hard to find anything my size. Like it's extremely hard. Like if I was big or fat or whatever, like no problem finding my clothes. But for me, super hard. But you had talked upon a subject about like making money. And I'd love to kind of touch upon that, because it's very admirable what a businesswoman that you are, and how you have sort of diversified your income stream. I think a lot of creators and creative people listening would benefit from hearing you speak upon the importance of diversifying your income stream. You have, for instance, like your YouTube channel, but you're also doing educational products, and you're selling software products like presets, and you're on top of your social media. So I'd love to hear you talk upon like the importance of like diversifying your income stream, sort of building your brand. And then maybe at the tail end of that, I'd love to hear you touch upon how you do it. Like how do you find the time? People always ask me, and I'd love to hear your answer for that. How do you have time to travel, to edit your photos, to post them, to do all these different things, and still be inspired without getting total burnout. And so much of what we do, like one of the places that I follow you is Twitter. And as you know, it's like you have to like freaking live on Twitter in order to get anything with the algorithm and in order to have any clout within that weird, ecosphere of Twitter. You have to like live on Twitter. And it's like, here you are, someone that's like celebrating the outdoors and beauty and exotic places and travel and getting out of your home. Yet so much of your time, I would imagine, is staring at your screen like all of us do. So it's a very weird thing to balance.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I mean, again, I kind of come from a point where I was fortunate enough to be able to build my business over the years. I feel like nowadays everything happens way faster. When you look at TikTok, especially, people literally blowing up to millions of followers within days, weeks, a few viral videos, and it blows them up. And it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with when you go from, not being anybody online, so everybody recognizing you all of a sudden, everybody knowing your face and who you are and so on. So I think that's a good thing, because it gave me time to figure out what I wanted to do. A lot of it is based on not necessarily luck, but taking opportunities that are given to you, and looking at YouTube, looking at my presets, looking at my workshops. A lot of it kind of comes from building up to it and like seeing what works. With YouTube, as I said, it was just kind of like a last straw to just get something creative going, and it just worked out to be a job, which is great. But there were so many things, like as you said, my presets, I started doing them when I was pretty late to the game. Like I was pretty against them at the beginning, and I started using them and playing with them, and I was like, shit, this is actually really good. And then I released my products, and they did really well. And then I started education, or like expanded my education, because I was already doing it on YouTube. I did workshops, which was amazing. And then last year I started NFTs, and it was a great way to sell my nude work as well, and to expand to the whole like NFT space, and the Web3 space, which is really big as well. So I think the problem is a lot of the time you have to pick your battles. And as you said, when you are a creative, it's really difficult, because everything requires your unrequited attention. And, with YouTube and with Instagram, it can become really, really frustrating down the line to just keep posting things over and over every single day, be on your phone for 2 or 3 hours trying to figure stuff out, especially with Reels, having to post multiple videos a week or even a few a day. It's just really hard to achieve if you are a creative, especially because when you look at TikTok, a lot of people that do TikTok and they do it very well, it's more like a lifestyle thing. You're sitting in the car talking to the phone, and they are way simpler videos. For us, it's like creating a photo shoot, coming up with a concept. And I think that's the reason why I was so burnt out for most of pretty much like last year, because it becomes a lot down the line, especially when you're doing it for a few years. And especially when, I've gone through ups and downs with my social media, where I was growing really rapidly because I had 2 really viral videos come up on YouTube, and I grew like, I don't know, 200, 300,000 within like a matter of maybe half a year. And having that traction for that definitely helped. And then as it dies down, you kind of feel demotivated because your stuff doesn't get as many views, and it's harder to come up with, things that are relevant and that people want to watch. And I had this moment where I was looking at my own content, and I was like, it's just kind of boring. I don't want to watch it myself. Why would anybody else want to watch it? And this is the thing where you kind of have to try and put yourself out there and create something that is more interesting and that is different. And it's definitely tricky. It definitely takes some time, and it's still something that I'm working on. So you kind of just have to take opportunities as they come, and you have to assess what's good and what's not. I think my biggest regret was not going harder on TikTok when I could, because I was there from the very beginning, and I just kind of glossed over it. I was like, it's not going to matter, whatever. And it does matter, and it could have done really well. So sometimes you take bets. Sometimes they're good bets. Sometimes they're bad bets. But I think the important thing is to keep trying and to keep doing different things. Not everything is going to, be successful. Not everything is going to be good. There's a lot of things that are probably going to fail. But that's okay. As long as you didn't spend $100,000 trying to get into it, as long as you have no major financial investments that are going to ruin you, as long as you're I'm not saying just losing your time, because losing your time is a lot, but losing your time is like the easiest investment you can do. in that sense, because it doesn't affect your daily life as much if something doesn't work out. But I think that's the biggest thing, just taking risk and just being open to opportunities, because I think a lot of people are not. A lot of people think that they are, but when it actually comes to it, I spoke to so many people over years, like, just about starting YouTube and trying to do different things, and they just have so many preconceived ideas that they don't necessarily kind of want to go and try it. And that's kind of what's stopping people, I think.
What does your typical workday look like? Or maybe you can like kind of give me a couple examples, because I know from my own example, like one day is completely different than the next. So maybe give me a few examples of what a typical workday might be broken into, because I feel like a lot of creative people that are going to be listening or watching this might have a misconception of like someone that's doing this professionally, what it looks like. It's like our job, right? Like you and I as creators is to make it look like it's effortless and easy, and all we do is fun stuff all the time. And like, all you
Yeah.
do is travel. That's all you do. And like, and it's more than that. And I'm like, can you kind of give people a dose of reality on what a typical day or week might look like?
Of course. I mean, for me, it's super different because it all depends on like what stage of like pre or post production I'm in. Obviously, there's days where I just plan my shoots. I talk to models, I find locations. So there's a lot of like back end work where I'm just literally sitting on my phone and just talking to people back and forth. I have meetings with clients. I email about like YouTube video ideas with my sponsors and so on. So that's kind of like some of the more phone-based things that I do. And then obviously you have shoot days, which can be pretty grueling, especially now, because as I said, I live in Connecticut at the moment. I live around 3 hours away from New York. So whenever I have a shoot day, I take a really early train to New York. I shoot there for a day, and then I come back to Connecticut the same day. So that's obviously a pretty long day, just to be coming in and out, because it's like 6 hours of travel alone, and then you have to still get there from Grand Central to wherever you are. So it can be quite a lot. But it's fine. Usually I just bring my computer with. I actually usually transfer the photos while I'm on the train, and I just try and like start doing color grading and so on. So kind of like get it out of the way. I recently just did the trip to Mexico. It was a 5-day trip. And basically the way my days worked, it was pretty intense, because the way it worked, it was 12 girls and 4 photographers. So it was kind of like whoever comes and goes. So I was just there taking photos for the girls all day. So we ended up shooting probably at like 7:30ish, 8 a.m. And we would finish, like one day I finished at like 11 p.m. So I was literally just going all day. Like we will obviously have breaks for like food and stuff, but I think people don't realize how much brain fatigue you get when you do long days of shooting like this, because your brain has to continuously think of like where to shoot, what position, like what pose, like what looks good, what light looks good. And it's like these tiny little assessments in your head that have to go all the time. So I think that was kind of the most exhausting thing. It wasn't even like my body being tired, it's just my head just producing this many photos. I ended up having 20,000 images from the like 3 or 4 days of shooting. So obviously straight after that I had to go through all of them. And the way it worked for this job was I just had to select the images that were bad, get rid of them, and then color grade whatever was good. And I just send it to the girls, and that's it. And that's my work done, which is pretty easy because I don't have to edit, which is ideal. So that took me probably 4 days of just sitting day to night on my computer, just going through the photos, selecting, color grading, recolor grading, checking the colors, making sure the skin looks good, everything looks good. After that, it was literally 2 or 3 days of just uploading, which is, again, not super exciting. When I do my YouTube videos, for example, I just literally sit in front of my computer on my Final Cut Pro, and I just set up my timeline of all the footage that I have. I figure out what voiceovers I need to do, if there's any voiceovers, which there usually is. I write down a whole script on my phone. I usually just like dictate it to myself, so it takes a few hours. I get any extra B-roll shots if I need to on that day. Usually it doesn't take me super long to come up with like, because my videos are very shoot based, I already have the content that I pre-filmed. But it still takes me, a while, like putting up everything together, and then the little final touches, like editing the photos for it, showing the before and after, showing all the camera settings. That takes a solid few hours as well. So again, it depends. Sometimes I do 12-hour days. Sometimes I do an hour day. Sometimes I don't do anything at all. I am very inconsistent with my work schedule. I am the worst. I work for a deadline. I'm the kind of person that needs the pressure of the deadline breathing on my back. And then I just literally sit there for 15 hours. So like, even though I have like 2 videos a month, for example, to do, I will do them on the 25th and the 28th.
Mhm.
because I know I don't have to do them earlier. So I am not the most self-disciplined person there is. I will admit that. But it's just something, that works for me, could work better. But I'm still working on that. I'm kind of still getting there, trying to like get everything going, the way it's supposed to be. So, but that's
Yeah.
the typical day for me.
Not easy. It's not easy. As someone that travels as much as you do, you're on the road quite a bit. I'm wondering, do you have a backup and storage system that you particularly like? Something that manages your all of your photos from all your work that maybe protects them, like with the cloud, with external drive. You're shaking your head no.
So no, so well, basically, I have multiple hard drives, and I usually just back up to a hard drive. I recently started investing. I use the big, chunky, lacy ones. They're like 5 terabytes, and I just usually put everything on them. But they are pretty slow. They're kind of a bit more temperamental, so I don't like having my stuff stored on just that because you never know. I recently started investing in the Samsung SSD drives because they're tiny. They're tiny, they're 2 terabytes, they're more expensive, but whatever, part of the business. And you can have multiples of them and they take no space in your luggage. So usually what I do is I have 2 or 3 of these drives on hand. I transfer them to the main hard drive and then I just back up them onto my other hard drive. So, and then once I'm done with all the photos, I transfer them to the chunky lacies and they just stay there and they just probably never get touched again, but I can't get rid of them. I just store them all. So I have multiple really heavy lacies. I should probably have some sort of like a, desktop drive, but to be honest, because I have so much stuff, I fill up these 5 terabyte drives probably once every 4 or 5 months. I would just have to have a lot of desktop things that I don't really need. So I just have multiple lacies with just the older stuff and then the SSDs that I work on right now because they're way faster, way more efficient. I can go through photos, color grading, and whatever I need to do way, way faster than the lacy. And yeah. And I just back them up as far as often as I can.
Like thinking about adding like a Blu-ray writer because it stores so much and it's like a hard copy and people keep talking about like, if everything just crapped out or if there was some sort of, EMF attack by a foreign invader, like you might lose all your drives, everything. So I'm like, maybe I should get a Blu-ray writer. I want to like finish up with kind of asking you where you see your mind focusing on most. Like, what are you most excited about? And with that, if there's not a great answer for that, then what else have I not brought up that's something that's like on the forefront of your mind that you're most passionate about that you'd like to end up on?
Well, I think I am back to, I was in America for a while. I was here for like 2 years without leaving, and now I'm back to traveling. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited to go to new places and take new photos. As I mentioned as well, I am kind of in the new phase of taking my own photos and creating something with that. So that's super exciting for me as well. I want to see where it goes, where I go with it, how I create the images, and so on. But I think just in general, I'm just interested to see where social media goes, how it changes. It's very interesting having to push yourself to adapt to whatever is happening because there is a lot of happening and things change all the time and you have to stay on top or you'll be left behind, unfortunately. And I'm really interested to see, especially when it comes to AI, because I've seen some crazy AI things coming out recently, and it's going to be very interesting to see where it puts out the photographers because I literally just seen a article this morning about a company offering headshots. They were like basically like work headshots, like office headshots, and they were all created by AI and they looked really good. I know people are complaining about it. They were like, it looks like AI. I'm like, it looks really good. So it's interesting to see how it's going to affect our work and where it's going to lead us because I feel like there's going to be a lot of changes because of AI, even with writing already. I've been writing my own scripts using AI for like some of it. It's really impressive and it's really scary to see how we're going to be replaced with machines. So I am really excited to see where my work is going to take me in a few years and if I'm going to be in like an AI master or something, I don't know. But I think that's kind of something that I'm looking forward to see or kind of dreading to see, kind of both at once. We'll see.
Yeah, it definitely scary. It's inspiring and it's exciting because like with medical breakthroughs or scientific breakthroughs, things like that with health and stuff, like AI is incredible. Like I can only imagine once they set AI to a point where you could just solve world hunger and solve diseases and all that's amazing. But as far as creators go, I think we're like totally screwed. Like I mean artists, artists are we're
Yeah.
screwed for the most part. Writers, musicians, like I think it's only a matter of like maybe a year, maybe, before you or I can go say, hey, write a song in the style of Michael Jackson and blah 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 blah, whatever, and
Yeah,
poof, it's like a hit song. And now like
absolutely.
it's exciting, like it's exciting from a sci-fi standpoint, but it's also kind of sad. Like it's sad to see people like us that have like honed our crafts, and people that have spent your a lifetime trying to perfect learning how to do something. And on the one side it's like, oh wow, you're complaining, I get it, but on the other side it's like it is sad like to see certain crafts and certain pursuits over the years kind of just vanish. Like when I first started
Mhm.
taking photography, it was all in a dark room, and I spent a lot of my college days in a dark room with chemicals, and obviously we don't need that anymore, but I really miss like the hands-on, getting your hands messy, and like that aspect to it. And that's one of the things I love about painting, but I also love digital art. So it's like I like it and I hate it at the same time. And it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter if you or I like it or hate it. It's going to be there. It's not going anywhere.
But I think it's also, you have to keep in mind that I don't think it's like all bad. I think there's going to be certain things that are going to be replaced. Like, for example, I don't know, I think like commercial headshots, because it's something that doesn't have to have a lot of soul in it, I guess. But, when you think about wedding photography, when you think about couples photography, like that's a point that somebody made that, like you're not gonna look at photos of your family and be like, oh, this is this AI portrait that I created of my family. Like people still want the experience of being photographed, of being there, being, with their family. So I think it's going to definitely be implemented a lot into our work. And I think you will see, especially, maybe fashion photographers getting affected, because you'll probably have fashion campaign being shot. Like they're already done through AI. I think there was like a Nike campaign that was already done fully through AI. But I think there's still going to be a lot of the manual, because when you think about it, there's a lot of people coming back to film nowadays, and there's a lot of people like developing and creating like analog kind of work. So I think it's definitely going to be an adjustment, and it's definitely going to be a change, and it's going to change a lot of things for a lot of people. But it's the same with, when you think about factories back in the day, and there has been a lot of things that have been automized, and we'll just have to adapt like we have with everything else. When you think about like how technology has progressed over like the last 20, 30, 40 years, it's insanity, and we just had to adapt. And I think that's how it's going to go. It's just going to have to change, and we're going to have to change with it, or we're going to be left behind again. So just a matter of experimenting and just, trying to push yourself out there, and just like trying to do things that you're maybe a bit uncomfortable with, but hopefully it's going to give you the right results.
Love that. I love the and kind of looking back in the past hour talking to, I love the way you view life in your career, where you like look at things that are fearful, you look at things that are hard, and you seem to find the silver lining. You seem to push through like obstacles and just say, I'm getting through, I'm going to figure this out. And I love your work ethic, and I love your work, and I really appreciate you making time to chat with me, Anita. Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking me again. I had fun.